from the film project that I'm working on, and it should be noted that this is only a prototypical version. And
all right, let's see what we're here to talk about today. This is pretty exciting. This looks cool.
On a couple of occasions, I've had people ask me something about, well, how long are you going to do this? Or why do you do all this? Don't you have a life for real?
I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to talk about this. Okay.
And this is part of my life for real. Doesn't hurt anybody, makes a lot of people feel good, and I think that's sort of the point of things.
No. I can't. I won't.
As long as I'm able to do it, I'm going to do it.
Okay, let's talk about Star Trek. Star Trek is an American science fiction television and film franchise with a 60-year history built on the lofty idea of achieving a cooperative socialist utopia steeped in the fundamentals of secular humanism. In a nutshell, I grew up in a pretty rough pocket of Montana surrounded by violent evangelical hillbillies, but I found and connected with Star Trek at such a young age, I can't actually remember my first interaction with... my first contact with the franchise. But it was absolutely foundational in shaping who I still am today as a person. It helped me understand that I wasn't alone in choosing understanding over belief and seeing the beauty in doing so. You don't have to invent ghost stories to appreciate the real wonder that actually exists everywhere in the realm of physics. Which, look, that sounds nerdy, and it is, but when you watch a fail army video, it's the physics that you're taking delight in. Look at those physics. Physics! I love them. They're the best. Star Trek has always had a reputation for being a little spectrumy.
Well, this is Captain Pike's total life support unit. As you can see, it encompasses the entire body except for the head, and it supports life.
But that's for very good reason. Actually, it's for
a plethora
of reasons. It's been said that while other franchises want to make you feel, Star Trek wants to make you think. That is challenging for a mass audience. Look, generally, combat is light on action and more about strategy. Here, you can see some lame douchebags complaining about it here.
What can we learn from Star Wars here?
As sacrilegious as it is to even bring that up in relation to Trek, but I think that the key is that, a modern audience is going to be already attuned to a much faster-paced movie. And Trek was always submarine warfare. It's like underwater warfare.
Their weapon takes all their energy. They must become visible in order to launch it. Our phasers ready?
I always think of it as Star Trek as beautiful classical music and Star Wars as rock and roll. And it felt like Star Trek needed a little bit more rock and roll to connect to a modern audience.
It actually respected its audience at all times. No! We are not ready. We're not ready to talk about that yet. You nope, be gone. Nope. Well, until we get there anyways, it actually respected its audience at all times. And it not only found its audience, it became a pop culture milestone. I mean, back in the early 90s when this shit was going on, Star Trek was one of the highest rated shows airing in syndication, garnering an impressive 12 million viewers by its 5th season. And it sacrificed nothing to gain these new viewers. It absolutely continued to challenge ideas that middle America holds dear. And it continued to present characters as perfect role models who could actually be kind of difficult to relate to at times.
I plan to study the performances of Olivier, Branagh, Shapiro, and Kulnark. Data. You're here to learn about the human condition, and there is no better way of doing that than by embracing Shakespeare. In faith, I do not love thee with mine eyes, for they in thee 1,000 errors see, but 'tis my...
It launched a second successful series of movies and multiple new series. And most importantly, it managed to maintain its integrity and dignity the entire way. Star Trek managed to stay true to itself. It didn't compromise its storytelling to rope in a bunch of idiots for cheap ratings. But regardless of how much you've actually engaged with the franchise, I'd be willing to bet money that you know what this is.
Scotty, beam us up.
And everybody knows what this is.
Live long and prosper.
The point is, it broke through to a mainstream audience in a big bad way. So, how did we get here?
Mr. Reese, could I trouble you to fire at something? Aye, sir.
Why you only calling us when you got your dramas? One of these days we'll repay you, we'll pay you.
I always think of it as Star Trek as beautiful classical music.
Gonna draw your last breath.
Most streaming services will not report their ratings, so we simply have no idea how TNG's Season 5's 12 million viewers compares to the modern offerings that we have here. But what we can do is contrast the compromises that have been made along the way to try to attract new viewers. And I think that's probably the easiest way to dissect this shit. So what do you say? Whoa! No, not that one. We can't get started out like that. So what do you say? I've got my lav mic.
Maximum warning.
I've got my duchtag.
Punch it.
I've got my poor people lighting. Let's watch some motherfucking Star Trek. What do I even mean when I say new Trek? Well, if you clicked on this video, and if you're still watching, thank you. But I would assume that you already have an idea of what I'm talking about, but just for the sake of being thorough, let's describe it. Until 2005, Star Trek meticulously adhered to a set of themes, ideas, and storylines that continued through 30 seasons of television and 10 movies. It wasn't always perfect, and mistakes were definitely made along the way. Star Trek was originally created and overseen by this pervert.
Back in the 60s, Gene wanted to be the womanizer and always gets the beautiful woman.
Gene wasn't the easiest person to get along with.
Well, Rick says, you got to go in to see Gene. So I go in, and he's very nice, but he says, I like the idea of Pleasure Planet. And I want it to be a place where you see women fondling and kissing other women, and men hugging and holding hands and kissing, and we could imply that they're having sex in the background. Huh? Really?
After Gene died in the early 90s, the second half of the franchise was lorded over by this prick.
I go back to Rick. He goes, pay no attention to that. Just get the captain laid.
And we have this all-time classic Twitter exchange that happened between Rick Berman and Denise Crosby, where, for whatever reason, out of nowhere, Rick Berman decided to post this photo of Denise Crosby's comm badge prop, and he said, Tasha's comm badge. Denise gave it to me after her last day of shooting on Skin of Evil! It's been on my desk for nearly 31 years. To which Denise responded, oh, friend, my final scene on Star Trek was not in Skin of Evil, but Symbiosis, which was filmed out of order. You came to the set to thank me and brought a cake, then ceremoniously ripped off my communicator badge saying, you won't be needing this anymore. Don't you remember?
Fuck you, Rick Berman.
Ultimately, I am really not too concerned with the idea of canon outside of the canonical themes. That really seems to me to be Gene Roddenberry's main priority anyway.
In Gene's wacky doodle,
vision of the future. He sees us now in our infancy, where we just gather and accumulate like a 3-year-old in a crib. That's mine, give me this, you can't have that, I need this, I need that.
He believed that mankind in the 24th century had resolved all conflict between themselves.
That developed between the first Star Trek and the second Star Trek.
Gene's conception on Next Gen is almost heavenly in that everyone's at peace.
Gene got very interested in learning more about humanism.
The research prior to The Next Generation led him to have a thesis that, if not perfection, man was evolving in a humanist way.
In The Next Generation, he tried to impart his humanistic philosophy.
Most science fiction that we experience today is a relatively dismal view of what the future is going to be like. Gene was obsessed with the idea that the future was going to be better.
Star Trek's a way of life, man. It's a good way of life. It teaches us all.
The 90s were dominated with overlapping Trek series on the small screen and blockbuster outings at the box office. By 2005, they had just kind of run out of ideas. They really started duplicating themselves. The Star Trek creativity well had essentially run dry. And then Star Trek?
He's dead, Jim.
That was it. Over. Dunzo. It was a good run. Goodbye, Captain Scott Bakula. Hey, don't forget to take Ziggy when you quantum leap out of Jonathan Archer's body, you fucking bum. Those were really dark times for Star Trek fans. It felt like the franchise had been gone for, seriously, about a decade. But in reality, it would actually only take director J.J. Abrams and his friends, his employees, 4 years. 2009 is when they would dig up the rotting corpse of Star Trek to resurrect it as a new, exciting, fast-paced action movie. And I really liked it. I went and saw this movie twice in the movie theater. I had such a good time with it. You see, the idea of rock and roll Star Trek is actually pretty fun for a couple of movies. You get away with skipping over a lot of depth when you only have like an hour and a half to work with. See what I mean? With a TV series, you're going to spend a lot of time in this world, and you're going to start to crave something with a little bit more substance to sink your teeth into. In 2017, I was over the moon with excitement for the premiere of a new Star Trek television series. Star Trek Discovery announced a brilliant cast that would have made the great Bird the Galaxy proud, and it boasted a very impressive VFX team that made the show look absolutely cinematic. Paramount Plus was spending a lot of money and taking Star Trek very seriously. Look, my understanding is that Netflix had paid for a chunk of the first season because that's where it aired internationally. None of that really matters. I don't really care about that business stuff. We were treated to a hilarious series abbreviation that we all got to have fun with for a little while before they officially changed it to Disco. And then the show finally premiered. I was so ready for beautiful music Star Trek to make its return, and then when Disco finally premiered, what we got was more rock and roll Star Trek. It has been nearly a decade since Star Trek Discovery premiered, and in that time we have been given 5 more television series, a series of shorts, and a made-for-TV movie. None of them have managed to feel like Star Trek in any way. Remember this guy here? J.J. Abrams' friend?
I always think of it as Star Trek is beautiful classical music and Star Wars is rock and roll. And it felt like Star Trek needed a little bit more rock and roll to connect to a modern audience.
He was put in charge of the entire Star Trek franchise on the small screen. He is the creative lead. He's in charge of everything. He's in the captaincy of modern Star Trek. This fucking guy.
Rock and roll.
He seems decent, like in interviews and stuff. I don't really have any issues with him. He seems like a nice enough guy, but I don't know how much he actually understands what's good about Star Trek. If we look at this clip from the special edition of the 2009 Star Trek DVD, special features, there's all sorts of insight into what they were thinking when they made this, and one of the most interesting things that I came across was this here, this thing called the Trekometer, where they show the main members of the production crew, and they tell you how much familiarity they have with the franchise to begin with. And let's take a look here.
The five of us who originally started working on the project, Bob, Alex, JJ, Damon, and I
don't know who this guy is.
Star Trek the most. He was the one who corrected me when I used the term Trekkie. That it's actually Trekker.
That's not true.
Who knew?
What do you think, Bob?
That's wrong. Gene Roddenberry called us Trekkies.
For as long as I've known him. When I met Bob, one of the things I remember most about him is that he had an enterprise phone, and the bridge would actually ring and you'd have to lift up the saucer section to answer the phone.
You know, when Star Trek II came around, the Wrath of Khan, Alex...
So Robert Orkey's a legitimate Star Trek fan. He's one of the writers. That guy knows his shit. Alex Kurtzman? Let's see here. They say Alex Kurtzman, they gave him a 5.
Knew it pretty well, but not nearly as well as Bob, who, has green blood.
Bob Orkey, they give him a 10, an 11.
When I was growing up, every night on WPIX, which is Channel 11 in Jersey, they had Star Trek episodes, and they were on late. I always lied to my parents about that I was in bed, but I was actually watching it. And it was at black and white television. That's how I was originally introduced to Star Trek.
Damon Lindelof, he's one of us.
It was me.
He's cool.
Nothing.
I don't know who this guy is. What's his name? Burke? I don't know who Burke is. He doesn't know Star Trek.
Is it let all of us have a voice and kind of...
And they give J.J. Abrams a 3. They say J.J. Abrams doesn't know anything about Star Trek.
And you had a guy who's like, Star Trek's all I live for, and this is a great movie.
We want it to be a movie that...
But I think it's really important to note that the guy who ended up actually having the keys to the franchise wasn't really that big of a fan, really didn't know that much about it. He comes at it from more of a place of being a Star Wars fan, and that is fascinating to me. With Star Trek Discovery, we have such a wonderfully diverse cast that the marketing is constantly highlighting that you would think this is legitimately the most woke Star Trek has ever been. And the online discourse seems to back this up, with defenders of modern Trek claiming that the only reason people don't like it is because they are repulsed by the representation. And look, those people do exist. I've seen them out there. We're going to talk about some really weird responses I've bumped into when making the point I'm about to try my best to articulate here in a bit, but we'll get there. And this is the reason that I'm actually making this video. I haven't seen this angle pop up too often, and I think it's more important than a lot of viewers realize. Full disclosure, I am a cis hetero white man. I fully understand and acknowledge my privilege to the point that I am uncomfortable getting into some of these topics, but as an ally, as a secular humanist, and maybe most importantly as a Star Trek fan, silence is violence, and I see people who aren't allowed to have the loudest voice in our culture being somewhat exploited in these productions, and it feels, well, off to me. When the cast of Discovery was first announced, so many of us were thrilled. It felt like Gene Roddenberry would have been proud, and it felt like we were finally getting back to classical music Star Trek. Then it aired, and we saw our first black female lead get treated like absolute garbage. She's depicted as the most selfish bridge officer in franchise history. She ignores orders and starts a war for no other reason than, oh, there's a shiny thing over there. I want to go see what that is. Like, they couldn't have come up with a better justification for her? She goes AWOL because she just wants to do her own thing. Her judgment is poor throughout, but we are just supposed to like her because Shaniqua Martin Green is awesome? Like, Shaniqua Martin Green is an immensely talented actor and an incredible human being, just truly decent, and a person who actually represents the ideas that Star Trek is supposed to stand for. I really genuinely like her so much, but that goodwill and the clout that the actor brings, well, it's really all that they're banking on to make you feel anything for this character. That's really it. This kind of gets into another topic, which is bad writing, but let's put a pin in that for now and come back to it. Anthony Rapp and Wilson Cruz are amazing in their roles, and like Shaniqua Martin Green, are also amazing humans and great role models for us all. Independently outside of Star Trek, those guys are both heroes of mine.
We got to see him through the lens of this relationship last season, but I think this season we really get to know him on a personal level, and flesh him out, so to speak.
Interesting
right,
use of turn of
right,
phrase.
Right. And also we get to really develop this relationship as well.
Casting them as the first gay Trek couple is, well, perfect. It's absolutely inspired casting in every way. the representation is beautiful. They're actually the secret best parents in franchise history. What's that? I forgot about the little floating robot guy. Oh. Okay. Well, these two characters adopt a non-binary child whom they raise with love, support, and attention. That in itself is a bold statement. That kind of representation is actually what Star Trek was created for. But for Star Trek, positive representation has never been enough. Everything is all groovy in the Federation for everybody, but they would go to a planet where something might be an issue for a particular culture in a way that mirrors our own. Our crew would explore the ethics of the situation in a manner that would hopefully educate the socially problematic villain of the week and also teach the moral to the audience in the process. New Trek doesn't do this. Culber and Stamets' unconditional love for their child is a brilliant example for us all, but their unconventional family structure is never really questioned or tested the way it would be in the real world, and that's where you get into the heavier philosophy that Star Trek has historically been very apt at handling. The one time that New Trek actually dares to challenge modern social issues, well, it's not really a bold or brave statement. As of February of 2026, only about 30% of Americans approve of what ICE is doing. Nobody likes them. Even shitheads don't like ICE.
You don't want militarized people in the streets just roaming around, snatching people up, many of which turn out to actually be U.S. citizens that just don't have their papers on them. Are we really going to be the Gestapo? Where's your papers? Is that what we've come to?
Also, I think it's worth noting that ICE isn't really a social issue, it's a specific organization. This is not addressing the concept of immigration on a broader scale, or the notion of borders as a wall that separates us before introducing some alternative as a bridge to unite. It just says, ICE sucks. Which, yeah, it sure does. But Star Trek always tackled the bigger ideas driving these kinds of groups. It took a stance against bad politics, bad ideas, about race, bad takes on gender and sexuality. It's always been political, but it's always been barely shrouded in metaphor, which worked to its benefit. Part of what Star Trek was trying to do is educate a portion of its audience without them knowing it. Certain people might watch this without understanding that it's actually about this.
Name's Douglas Marks. I live in Portland. I've been a fan of Star Trek for a number of years.
If you told them that this was actually about this...
Ever heard of filking?
Well, they would probably have nothing to do with it, but if they can have it presented through the lens of aliens, they might actually be willing to understand some part of it. New neural pathways start to form in the deep recesses of their subconscious, and as the infinitely wise Mr. Plinkett says,
I'm so subtle you might not have even noticed, but your brain did.
The subconscious impact of a properly planted idea can have a greater long-term effect than bashing someone over the head with a blatant moral who has absolutely no desire to hear it. Look at that beard. Ultimately, I am talking about manipulation for good. I've always been inspired by Star Trek's ability to insidiously preach inclusion, love, and understanding to a portion of its audience who don't necessarily understand that's what's happening on the surface.
But your brain did.
Oh my god, look at how cool Jake looks. Oh, I love this. Okay. Star Trek has always preached progressive secular humanism to a public that wouldn't listen to any one person stating these ideas. Remember our statistic from earlier? 30% of Americans are happy with what ICE is doing? That's roughly 100 million people. That's a lot of people. We're just going to tune out the second you see this. But if you could cleverly disguise ICE as an alien that our crew has to deal with, I don't know, like this, like that. You see like how the Cardassians are like Nazis? If Star Trek could figure out how to do this, the people who desperately need to be reached the most, now more than ever, might actually listen. They might not immediately understand, but at least they're listening. If you're not at least making an actual attempt to be heard by the other side, what is the point? Star Trek didn't build a reputation of challenging its audience with social issues by preaching to the choir, and I'm afraid that's all New Trek is doing. Hey, thanks for the clip, Francis Q. I didn't have to go digging through my DVDs to find this one. Francis Q, you're all right. Oh, hey, by the way, if you've been noticing my DVDs moving around down here, it is because I'm sourcing most of my clips the old-fashioned way, because I'm But you're going to notice my DS9 cases like deteriorating and falling apart as we move around because these things are terrible. They just weren't made to last. But here they are 20 years later and we're still using them. That's kind of cool. All right, back to what we were talking about, the important stuff. Humanity! Kylie, I wonder who in the production was related to someone or had a daughter named Kylie, and that's why whatever. Look, there's something about this that feels like a tightly locked up safe space instead of a passage to better and bigger ideas. That's hot. I could totally see a conservative person getting into Star Trek simply because the warrior culture of the Klingons appeals to them, or Captain Kirk is a badass. But maybe they start thinking about concepts like honor a little differently. Maybe that concept has never been properly defined for them. That might legitimately create a foundation. What? Do you need to go outside? I'm sorry, I have to take my dog out. I'll be right back. It is time for a greeny treat. Okay, what were we talking about? Star Trek, yeah. That might legitimately create a foundation shift that could affect how they vote, but they won't even listen if you approach with, well, with this. In this way, I really don't feel like new Star Trek is very woke. It has fantastic representation, but the stories generally don't offer a situation where a crew has to defend a humanist moral or ethic. I mean, New Trek just does this.
They, not she. I've never felt like a she or a her, so I would prefer they or them from now on.
Okay. This, on the other hand, this is a statement. By the way, at this point, I know that The Outcast is on disc 4 of season 5 in the Blu-ray set. I keep going back to it. I know where it is. And what this ends up doing is it makes such a poignant and important moment like this end up feeling like, well, nothing more than lip service, really. Swapping out all these Blu-rays, here's something else that I noticed. If you don't think that Star Trek is becoming smaller in its scope, these are all the language options that you get when you put in the TNG Blu-ray. Look at this. We've got Donkst, we've got German, we've got English, there's something, I think that's Klingon. It might be Cardassian, I don't know what this is. But look at this huge range of language options. They want you to be able to consume this regardless of where you're from. They want as many people as possible to be able to get these messages. This feels important. This feels like they care. This feels like this matters. This feels like it's trying to reach people. This feels like it's trying to be as inclusive as possible. And this is the language option that you get when you put in, let's see here, this is season 1 of Strange New Worlds on 4K UHD. We have German, English, and French. Apparently, they're not interested in exploring any of the strange new worlds that actually exist here in the real world, or reaching them. This doesn't feel very inclusive to me at all. I want to be perfectly clear with my feelings that representation is of extreme importance. There are a lot of problems with these shows, but the cast absolutely is not one of them. I give Disco a lot of credit for making the best parents in Trek history a gay couple. It's true. Worf is a terrible father. Everybody knows that. Loxana Troy is so selfish. She's like a notch above Casey Anthony as far as mothers go. Shit. Even Ben Sisko abandons Jake so that he can go off and be Wormhole Jesus. So these guys are the best parents in Star Trek history, and I think that's really great, but why did the moral education stop there? No characters show up to present the bad take on this so that Star Trek can explicitly say, hey, that's a bad take. Why have we stopped challenging a portion of the audience, and why are people still arguing online with weirdos who Star Trek never had a chance of reaching in the first place? How do we even process this in terms of Star Trek? Well, let's talk about IDIC for a second. Infinite diversity within infinite combinations. This is a Vulcan philosophy that pops all throughout Star Trek. And what it means is that we are better off when there are more different kinds of people. Variables can be good, but not always, and this is why it's very important for us to define the word infinity. And infinity is basically just an endless continuation of a defined set. It doesn't necessarily include every possibility. For example, you can count to infinity and skip numbers. An infinity of even numbers will never include the numbers 1 or 3. We know those numbers exist, we can perceive of them, but they will never occur. They will never be included in this current count to infinity that we're discussing here. You can count to infinity by tens, 10, 20, 30, 40. That will never include the number 22, for example. We can imagine that number. We can perceive of that number. We know that 22 exists, but in this context of an infinity, it will never happen. The point being that you can actually define an infinity, and some infinities are larger than others because they contain more possibilities. But infinity doesn't mean every possibility, it's simply an endless count. Now, why I'm even bringing this up is that I have heard shithead Trekkies try to include Nazism, racism, homophobia, all of these bad ideas into their definition of IDIC. But we know that an infinitely diverse group of people doesn't have to include every type of person. In fact, it cannot, because tolerance is incompatible with intolerance. An infinitely diverse group of tolerant individuals will not include these guys. And it still adheres to the logical assertion of IDIC without any hypocrisy, because you can define an infinity. Now, that's not to say that everyone should agree on everything or that there shouldn't be conflict or argument, because those are tools of progress. Listen, if a bigot is complaining that they are being excluded from the fandom, it's important to keep in mind that the individual is only being excluded as far as they cling to hate. The person isn't being excluded, the ideas that they bring with them are. And if that person tries to use IDIC as some sort of defense, they couldn't be more wrong if they were this guy. IDIC does not, and by definition, cannot include bigots. There's no point in preaching to the choir. The bigots are who the message of Star Trek needs to reach the most, and Star Trek always tried to reach those people. It's the Herald, or was that Kumar? I never watched those movies. He's one of those guys. I recently posted a comment online describing modern Star Trek's lack of wokeness in the face of everyone screaming how woke it is. This is the reply that I got from someone. I want to show you this. This person's complaint was basically that the Star Trek writers are too stupid to write a science class, so they have to write about the gay Klingon. That's such a bad take. All I can really say about that is, look, there are some really stupid people out there. Dangerously stupid. On some level, we can't worry about them. You have to ignore them until they start infringing upon your rights. You have to focus on those who have the capacity to grow, learn, and evolve. There are some people out there who were perhaps raised with some real problematic ideas that a well-placed piece of art like Star Trek could start to chip away at. And those people are absolutely out there. Like, I've interacted with them, I've talked to them, I'm related to some of them. I mean, there are members of my family who are like scary evangelical weirdos, but they have some surprisingly progressive views on a few things that I can directly trace to specific episodes of Star Trek because they're also big Star Trek fans. It works. I just feel like good writing that you work really hard on could actually reach those people. But this isn't going to reach them, or probably anyone for that matter. I don't think anyone seems to like this. I mean, that's a lot to say that if we're trying to have a groovy party, you can't have a bunch of Nazis show up to ruin it, but you do need to make an effort to try to convert as many of them as possible. We can't reach every shithead, but you can get through to some of them, a surprisingly large number of them, and it's a disservice to humanity if we don't at least try. So, we have wonderful representation in New Modern Trek, but beyond that, how is it handling loftier ideas that Star Trek has always tackled? Well, it kind of just simply isn't. It's focusing on big, grand, season-long story arcs that take too much attention. We don't have enough time to spend with our characters. And with all of these new Star Trek shows, they really push the diversity forward in their marketing. They want to trick the audience into thinking that this is the wokest production in history.
As you may have heard, Anthony and I are proud to play the first ever queer couple in the 50-year history of Star Trek on television.
But I want to talk about the amazing queer energy that is Star Trek Discovery. We've got our space dads, Culber and Stamets. We have their informally adopted kids, Adira and Gray, played respectively by Blue Del Barrio and Ian Alexander. The brilliant and sardonic Jet Reno.
Aunt Jet.
Played by the equally so Tig Notaro. The pansexual Terran Emperor, Philippa Georgia. Played by Michelle Yeoh. Plus, we have queer actors Mary Weissman and Emily Coots. But this season, this most recent season, we were introduced to the complicated, sympathetic, and queer villain, Dr. Tarka, played by Sean Doyle. So I want to know what's next for the queer agenda.
Toasters for everyone.
But the real-world bigotry that makes this representation such a big deal is never confronted or even acknowledged. It does, in some ways, make it feel like the diversity is just here for the marketing. It feels disingenuous. Isn't it so wonderful that we have a couple of gays? Aren't we so brave? We even have a gay Klingon. Isn't that the bravest thing you've ever seen? Praise us! I mean, look, that's great. I love Culver. I love Stamets. I think that the gay Klingon is whatever. I haven't watched that show. I'm not going to. But look, what are you going to say that might actually reach someone who holds a prejudice against the LGBT community? How are you going to challenge those beliefs in a meaningful way that might actually affect change? It is not the easiest thing in the world to make some sort of important statement while also being entertaining. But that's why the writing on Star Trek was so good in the 90s in particular, and why it's really not at all now. But, well, hey, since I mentioned that, speaking of bad writing...
You may proceed.
I don't know why I'm still bothering with this. This video is lucky if it gets 7 views.
How long are you going to do this, or why do you do all this? Don't you have a life for real?
I just feel like I've spent the last 10 years watching people on both sides of the new Trek argument try to shut it down before even engaging with it. Someone will say, oh, detractors will just say that new Trek has bad writing, but they never have any specific examples. I will politely leave no less than 3 paragraphs of specific examples that get totally ignored. So I guess I'm just here to kind of get it all out, and I'll get ignored here. But it feels therapeutic, you know, it's good to kind of bleed it all out. You know, I never have to leave another long comment about this anywhere again. I'm making my statement here. This is obviously my first video. I have no clue what I'm doing. The quality is all over the place, and I'm actually learning a lot. I love long-form YouTube video essays. I'll spend an entire day listening to someone talk about things that I love. The longest one I think I ever watched is this 12-hour breakdown of every single Star Wars video game ever made from Jordan's Retro Game Adventure. It's just become one of my favorite formats for expressing ideas. And this video has been a real education in the work that actually goes into making one of these. If nothing else, I've gained that. I may never make another one of these. I'm not trying to build a channel. I don't have enough followers or views for monetization, and I'm really not too concerned about that if I'm being honest. I just need to get this all out. And now you, one of, I hope at least 7 viewers, have to deal with my bad writing. Wait, that's not Patrick Stewart. Who's that guy?
You idiots! These are not them! You've captured their stunt doubles!
By the way, this random episode of TNG from 35 years ago that's just about this weirdo says more about the current dangers of artificial intelligence than anything that has been produced by the franchise in the last 10 years. I seriously just came across this while making it. Look, okay. I just put in the Blu-ray for Season 3 of Star Trek Discovery to throw on some random B-roll for the next segment, and look at that. Now we're down to 2 languages. We got English and French, and just fuck everybody else, I guess. There's your idic. None of the people who worked on any of these shows are bad writers. I mean, they got frickin' Mark Bernardin on Season 2 of Star Trek Picard, and even that ended up being one of the worst seasons in the history of television. And here's the thing, I think it's a bummer that he worked as a supervising producer because I actually really respect his opinion, and he's never going to be able to be candid about his feelings regarding all of this. What I think most likely happened was that the writer's room was given contradictory edicts. These writers were told to make Star Trek appeal to everyone by making it appeal to no one. Do whatever you have to in order to make it feel less spectrum-y. And I'm almost certain that Paramount executives use that word. So no more story plots that heavily involve the function of technology. Just say it's mushroom spore magic and move on. A lot of us like getting into the real theoretical physics that technical consultants would use to fill in the spaces where writers would literally just write, "Tech the tech. He teched the tech. They teched the tech." I actually like having to know that these 2 tubes coming into the warp core here are actually part of a particle accelerator. The famous dilithium crystals everyone thinks powers the warp drive. They don't actually do that on their own. You see, the particles smashing into each other near light speed create enough energy to power the warp drive. The dilithium crystals are strong enough to withstand the force of that reaction, so that the energy can be used to power the warp drive. And that's just the warp drive. That's just bending space so that you can travel a distance in a shorter amount of time than it would take light to get there without actually accelerating beyond 186,000 miles per second, which is the universal speed limit. The ship itself runs on a fuel called deuterium. It runs on gas. But you can enjoy the entirety of the show without knowing any of that. It goes out of its way to make this nerdy science shit as accessible as possible. But there are some stories that are absolutely enhanced if you do have an understanding. Look, even though TNG is 40 years old, most of the science still holds up, and that really gives it a lot of authenticity. New Trek thinks that there is a magical network of invisible mycelium that connects the entire universe together. You can use tardigrade blood to, do something with mushroom spores to, instantly warp anywhere in the universe? This just feels lazy by comparison because old Trek took the time to be as right as it possibly could with the information that was available to them at the time. And I mean, who is this supposed to appeal to? The Magic Spore Network is still on the nerdy side of things as far as appealing to a mass audience goes. It's going to confuse most people because of how little sense it makes to begin with. So you end up losing that wider audience on it anyway. The science around it is so outlandish that you lose the real nerds on it. I mean, the whole idea of Discovery, at least as a ship, is built around this mushroom spore drive, so you can't really avoid it. Now, old Trek definitely tiptoed into magic. Q is impossible, but he is being used thematically to show how evolved our crew is. They don't drop to their knees in worship of this omnipotent being the way a lot of modern humans would. They're actually kind of annoyed by Q. They approach the situation with curiosity and scientific caution.
Did you realize that the next generation, it was possible to characterize it as Gene Roddenberry's dream of heaven?
I would never have thought that at the time. But now that we're talking with his conception of the future and human beings in the future, and Q is God. I mean, just look at the character. Look at everything about the character.
An atheist. But he invents Q.
As I sit here thinking about it, it's pretty startling. God's a character, a literalized character on Star Trek The Next Generation.
By an atheist.
By an atheist. Very interesting.
If Q is a god, then God is just another life form for us to understand. You know, it is quite the bold statement, and to properly explore this theme, it is necessary to throw something impossible at our crew to see how they deal with it. It's handled as eloquently as possible here. And this is like the opposite of that. Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be feeling here. I don't know what I'm supposed to take away from this Red Angel stuff. Is Michael Burnham's mother our Lord and Savior? What are they trying to tell me here? I don't get any. And also, why does everything have to be red? What the hell is red matter? And how is this shit supposed to even work? They don't tell us. My God, I mean, the idea of our crew being confronted with magic in order to show how enlightened they've become is like, it's handled even better in this piece of trash. You know what? I think I am going to make another video because I actually really love Star Trek V, and you should too. So like, I don't know, maybe subscribe if you want to hear about that. I mean, hey, do whatever you want. It's not like anyone's holding a phaser to your head. Huh? Do it! I don't think we can really blame the writers for this. Apparently, executive producer Brian Fuller told the writers that they had to incorporate this mushroom magic into the script. Fucking science, bro. Ooh. Yeah, dog. Get down with this tardigrade shit. The writers are not idiots. They were handicapped by this spore drive. You know, I actually don't like that use of the word handicapped because of the negative connotation. So in the spirit of Star Trek, I feel like maybe I should find a better way of saying that. Just floating around like the Baron Harkonnen. Okay, so it's like the plot of Star Trek is Nancy Kerrigan's knees. Brian Fuller is Tanya Harding. And the Discovery Writers Room is Shane Stant. I'm so sorry. Why? Because money. It's always because of money. Because capitalism is evil. Free Louis! So you cut the real science out to appeal to a wider audience, but then you do this.
You guys, this is so fucking cool. So sorry.
They end up trying to play these really weird games with their potential ratings numbers, and it just ends up being like,
cut it in half and double it.
This is the power of math, people! Come on!
You are correct, Ensign.
ooh. So it seems like the writers were, I'm with her, the writers were instructed to make all of the characters talk and behave the way people talk and behave today to try to lessen the entry barrier. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Star Frat, The Next Generation. You lose another portion of the original fan base with this tonal change, and you probably turn off a lot of potential new viewers in the process. I feel like this one is probably pretty self-explanatory. Part of the reason old Trek felt like classical music was the cadence of its dialogue, which was always thoughtful, even when it was being fun. Now, TNG has been called competency porn, which I do not view as a bad thing. These characters are actually pretty relatable, all things considered. I absolutely relate to Riker's choice to not advance his career. He found a place where he's happy and where his skills can be put to use. He cares more about that than a promotion. And even though that man is a near perfect representation of a human, I can actually relate on some level. I relate to Counselor Troy's deep sense of care and compassion for those around her. She really cares. I definitely can relate to Data's journey to discover humanity. Unless you're a total asshole, you probably can too. I mean, I can even relate to Wesley for being a smart kid who didn't have a ton of friends, and he still wasn't a weirdo like Barkley. He was pretty normal, but yeah, I like Wesley. I can relate to Geordi for being a tech guy who never lost touch of the humanity behind all of it. I don't know if I relate to Dr. Crusher so much, but I like her character a lot, and I think Gates McFadden is absolutely a necessary part of this cast. I did not mention her in my rundown of bad parents earlier, but she totally left Wesley to run off and be the head of Starfleet Medical. He was fine, but still. Jean-Luc Picard, as depicted in the 7 seasons of the television series, is my favorite character in all of fiction. I can't really relate to him personally so much, but he's so much of what I aspire to. And this continues. On DS9, I fully relate to Kira's passion for fighting fucking Nazis. Get him, Kira! Where's mine? Where's mine at? Woo! Get him! And we're just going to keep using the same clip because there he is, Miles O'Brien, the most relatable man in the entire universe. That's why they always torture him. I think we can all probably relate to Janeway being in positions where there really is no right choice and still having to act. And on a much more personal note, I personally really do identify with the character of Tom Paris because he's a hot, sardonic rebel who everybody wants to fuck. I just don't understand where the notion that these characters are somehow beyond an audience's ability to identify with came from. It's absurd. It doesn't make any sense at all. These characters are not better than us. They are us. They're just the best of us with all the bullshit stripped away. And if that's not worth aspiring to, then I don't know what the point of any of this Star Trek shit is anymore. I mean, my point is you don't have to have a scene where Counselor Troy says, "Fushizi," to make her relatable in the 90s. For whatever reason, the executive producers on modern Star Trek felt that the lack of modern vernacular made the characters feel impossible to relate to, or maybe just difficult to write for. I don't know, but for whatever reason, they decided to have people talk like this.
This is so fucking cool.
Even with this major tone shift to make characters feel more relatable, the only thing I really relate to here is that Tilly has an anxiety disorder. That's it. Actually, none of the characters on any of these new shows have any confidence in themselves, and oh boy, are we going to get to that in a second. By the time I got to season 4 of Disco, I realized I could skip entire scenes and still follow the plot without missing anything. It is not an exaggeration when I say that almost any time 2 characters are alone talking to each other on Star Trek Discovery, what is happening is a motivational pep talk. It's usually just one person saying, "I'm not good enough. I don't deserve to be here." And then one of their friends saying, "You are a firework. You have a beautiful soul, and every breath you take is a celebration of life." Season 1 is really bad, but Season 4 is by far the worst offender of this. You can skip about a third of the whole season and miss absolutely nothing. Well, you can technically skip the whole thing and miss nothing. I mean, in one single episode, David Cronenberg shows up to give 2 motivational pep talks. He's supposed to be like some sort of dark, shady, temporal investigations agent, but he seems more like a therapist. I mean, here he is giving Michael Burnham a pep talk, and then if we jump to the end of the episode, here he is validating Paul Stamets' worth in the exact same episode. Again, you can totally skip this and not miss anything. None of this matters. Chin up, Stamets. You're a good man. David Cronenberg likes you. I sincerely wonder how and why David Cronenberg got roped into all this. I can only assume he was attracted to the body horror of it all. The constant motivational pep talks could actually be the fault of the writer's room. It could be a producer edict, but I can't imagine why that would be. Why would someone come in and say, make these characters relatable by making them constantly question their own abilities? I don't understand. Why would that be a mandate? But also, I mean, why would you do it if it wasn't? Our crew constantly needing their abilities validated just makes me feel like I'm probably not in very good hands on this ship and I want off. New and old viewers are going to be turned off by these bumbling wannabe professionals. Anyway, enough about that. Moving on. So the writers are then told by their producers that they have to move some of the heavier philosophy into the background because, well, you know what, our cast is just so diverse, that pretty much covers most of the heavy lifting in that regard. Our cast is our message, and that's going to have to be enough because we need the time to focus on our action and mystery plots like the Red Angel here. It's important to make the show feel like a video game cutscene because that's what kids like.
Well, this is Captain Pike's total life support unit. As you can see, it encompasses the entire body except for the head, and it supports life.
Oh my God! Did David Cronenberg direct that? Jesus Christ, Star Trek. Okay. This loses a portion of the original audience who tuned in every week to explore the ethics of secular humanism in beautiful detail. If their goal is to rope in the Fast and Furious crowd, well, this might be the only change so far that might actually work to attract a mass audience the way it was intended, but it's also the most egregious betrayal of what Star Trek always was, what it stood for, and what it attempted to preach. So little is gained, I can't imagine that too many viewers are actually won over by this more vapid form of storytelling, and we lose so much in the process that we have to wonder if this transaction ended up being worth it. Only Paramount knows that. I think it should be pretty obvious to anyone who has seen any of this at all that the writer's room was told to dumb it down to appeal to a mass audience. These are not dumb writers. These writers were given the impossible task of making Star Trek appeal to everyone by, well, what they did here was they made it appeal to fewer people than it initially did. At least the J.J. Abrams movies stayed true to their own dumb tone. They didn't exceed their reach by trying to come across as smarter than they were. Those movies were good, dumb, fun popcorn movies, and they fully embrace it, and they work. Alex Kurtzman's TV version of Rock and Roll Star Trek is a not-so-fun, big, dumb popcorn TV show, but it desperately wants to make you think that it is more than that, just because, well, the franchise always has been. Alex Kurtzman told these writers that they had to make an appeal to everyone, except for the people who are interested in technology and science. Except for the people who are interested in philosophy, except for the people who like aspirational characters. Because those things move a little bit slower, like classical music, and that's not allowed. Look at this midlife crisis rock and roll leather jacket he's rocking there. It's all rock and roll!
Rock and roll.
The thinking really seems to be that not everybody likes classical music, but everybody likes fun, so let's just make it fun and maybe some of the fuddy-duddies will show up. I mean, that's the basic edict for these shows and, well, the situation the writers had to deal with. I think what I probably find most disappointing is all of the potential that they just flushed down the toilet immediately. I mean, Star Trek Discovery offers us, no joke, my favorite captain in franchise history, only to kill her off 2 episodes in, just to resurrect her as a predictable, over-the-top, boring, mustache-twirling villain. I hate Mirror Universe Philippa Georgiou so much, it's just such a waste of an amazing character. Philippa Georgiou Prime is a perfect role model for Michael. She was a perfect role model for us. You know, they always say you want Kirk in a fight, you want Picard in a negotiation, you want Janeway if you need someone who can do both. Philippa Georgiou is like Captain Janeway, but also always right. Janeway could really make mistakes along the way. She was put in a very complicated situation. The only mistake Philippa Georgiou ever made was, well, trusting Michael Burnham. I like Michael Burnham's haircut. She looks pretty cool. Anyway, I like Saru. I like all these people. I like Michelle Yeoh. I believe Star Trek Discovery would have been light years more successful if we got to spend a whole season with Philippa Georgiou Prime. Oh, there she is. If we as an audience got to witness, feel, and take part in the relationship with Philippa Georgiou and Michael, her loss would actually have some impact. I mean, my pitch for fixing disco, which, you know, some people might say it doesn't need fixing, whatever. That's, you know, it's my opinion. It's my video. My pitch for fixing disco would be to basically give us a normal season with likable characters we spend time getting to know, And then you do the Battle of the Binary Stars at the very end as a season finale. Well, is that Michael Byrne? That guy. Season 2 would be the evil Mirror Loca Lorca plot. You bring him in to mix things up after we're settled in and comfortable with our surroundings. We could use Philippa Georgiou's example to sort of trace Michael's growth as we see her use lessons she and we as an audience learn from her beloved mentor as she has to navigate through difficult ethical choices to eventually earn her way into the captain's seat. But no! Destiny dictates that Michael's mother is Space Jesus, so she needs to go help the Red Angel to save us all. That's what we're doing here. The way that Michael Burnham becomes captain really throws me off. It feels weird because it seems like the entire arc of this show is about building to this moment, but I mean, what happens is that Sauru was made the captain, and that makes more sense to everyone, but... what is that? I didn't know that was going on. Wait, is that just what the show does? Oh shit, it goes into like a weird, shaky-ass slow motion effect. No idea. Sauru decides he has more important responsibilities, so he has to leave the ship. And, well, they basically just make Michael the captain because someone has to do it. Okay, I guess. That's it. And this is what we've been building to for, all these seasons? It's just sort of deflating when you get there. Season 3 of Discovery is fascinating. The whole thing basically feels like a desperate attempt to try to course correct, but the only thing they really managed to course correct was the idea that the way the show looked, the technology looked too advanced to fit in with the time frame of the original series, so they moved the ship 900 years into the future where everything would fit a little better within the canon of the series, which, again, I don't care about. That stuff doesn't matter to me so much. Everything else was pretty much business as usual. The writing didn't change, the way the characters are handled didn't change, we didn't get into any more philosophy. They just basically, they just changed the time frame that we're set in to make it match the look of the show, and that's all they did. That's the only changes that were made, but boy, did they make them. I'm convinced that this line here was actually snuck in by one of the writers in reflection on the script. I think that this is one of the writers actually talking about their feelings on the show. Here, look at this.
It's pretty good for shit.
I 100% believe that is how one of the writers feels about this show.
It's pretty good for shit.
That is how one of the writers feels about this show. Some of what we are shown in New Trek is preposterous beyond my ability to process. And a lot of it doesn't even really have anything to do with the writing. This magical space that exists inside of the Enterprise is a way to move elevators around the ship, for example. This room is roughly the size of Texas, which means it has to exist in some sort of pocket universe. Look at the size of this thing. This space is just how the elevators get around. This broke my mind the first time I watched it. I could not believe what I was seeing here. Why does this space exist? How much energy is required just to have this little pocket universe here to move your elevators around? What's wrong with a normal turbo lift shaft? I can't imagine that the writers defined this space in the script, but I mean, someone fucked this up. Look at this. I have set up my camera a couple of times here. I've switched some things over. I just left this playing. They're still in this space. It's still going on. It's that big. Forget Texas. It's the size of the moon. Into Darkness. I actually like Into Darkness. A lot of people criticize this movie by saying that it's just a cheap knockoff remake of The Wrath of Khan, but I think there's only one scene in this movie that really calls back to that movie, and it's Kirk's heroic sacrifice in the radiation chamber, which mirrors Spock's in the original. And instead of Kirk yelling Khan, we get Spock yelling it. That's basically it. Other than that, this movie does its own original thing. Hey, there's Fox News gotcha journalism in the future. I don't know if I have much else to say about the matter of New Trek's writing. It's messy, but I think we do have to be careful about where we point fingers. I mean, if we really want to get into it series by series, which I don't, I guess I feel like Star Trek Discovery is a confused mess. It's desperately trying to figure out what it is it's trying I don't know. This show is just, it's not fun. It's not a fun ride. And then we have Star Trek Picard. The first 2 seasons are traumatic for Star Trek fans. Apparently Patrick Stewart had a lot of control, which we'll get to in a minute when we're talking about the TNG movies. But yeah, this is a lot of people like season 3. I saw the season finale in an IMAX theater. That was kind of cool. I didn't love it, but yeah, season 3 is definitely improvement over the first 2. But man, this is a rough watch. This is hard to get into. This is hard to explain. This is hard to understand what anything's. This will destroy you. The Prodigy is okay. You know, it's for little kids. It's toddlers. It's whatever. It's fine. It's not great. I don't know if any kids really got into it. Just seem to be like weirdos on the internet who are defending that. I don't know. I don't know if it needs defending. I don't have a whole lot to say about this. It's fine. It's impressive. It looks good. It's for babies. It's a baby show, and it does a pretty good job. It kind of feels like the Star Wars Clone Wars show. It's definitely kind of tipping its toes into that area. And the characters aren't really defined Star Trek races. I don't know. They look like Guardians of the Galaxy people, so it's a little strange, but whatever. We got Catherine Janeway, so that's cool, right?
I've been asked to bless people.
Lower Decks. This is the one that everyone says actually feels like Star Trek. I couldn't disagree more. Just because it has a familiar setting and familiar faces, that's about it. The humor is obnoxious. Like this.
Ooh, this is the new shuttle with the blast shield. The blast shield is the blast shield. And it comes down and it goes up. Blast shield.
They kept featuring it in the trailers, and I was just annoyed with it. And I mean, that's basically what you're getting throughout the rest of the show. They were very proud of that joke, and it's just lame. It's all lame. None of it's clever. None of it's funny.
Are you pretending to do a captain's log?
We're all supposed to keep logs.
Okay, let me listen to it.
No, go away. Leave me alone.
I can't believe you're wasting your shore leave on this.
It looks like Star Trek. It doesn't feel like it, though. Strange New Worlds. Strange New Worlds here is kind of the epitome of dumbing things down to try to appeal to a young, hip audience. And it's, instead of doing a huge serialized plot, Strange New Worlds has kind of returned to some of the episodic storytelling. And I guess they've tried a little bit to try to listen to some of the fan complaints to return to a little bit of what used to be, but man, the tone is so off on this. And then we have the new Starfleet Academy show that looks like basically Strange New Worlds, but even skewing younger. I don't know what's going on there. People online don't seem to like it. Even the usual defenders of modern Trek have kind of turned on that one, and that's been interesting to watch. If we're talking about the decline of Star Trek, it actually started in 1982 with the release of everyone's favorite Star Trek movie, except mine. There's illumination to be found in that nebula, so let's dive in.
Let me take it to the movie, shorty. I'm sure later on you will be my baby. Let's sit down and just be by my side. I got the popcorn, I know what I feel like.
See? I told you I went and saw it in the movie theater. This is the evidence that they made us maintain. There you go, you can see it a little closer there. I wouldn't really say it's a bucket. It's more of a, like cardboard. It's more like garbage. Is what it is. They also made us take one of these. Here, let me show you a little closer here again. There we go. Pretty decent quality actually. There's a little bit of a sheen to it. It's frameable, I guess, if you wanted. He looks. He looks like he has no idea where he is. Like they just wheeled him out of the nursing home yesterday. Oh no. Everyone else looks fine. Fucking Raffi. Raffi. Why does she have to be here? But this is true. This is 100% true. What I'm about to tell you is that when you were going into the theater, there was a little table set up, and they had there was a Paramount, some sort of intern or something that was working there that was handing these out to everyone. And as you went in, they said, "Hey, you disgusting, fat, ugly greaseball, you need to take this. You know what this is? This is your shame certificate. This is proof that you did this, you disgusting, fucking vile human being." And the thing is, I actually watched all of Star Trek Picard, so I understood. Like, she's not totally wrong. They weren't wrong about that. Like, I get why you would think that if you actually got to the end of this. Like, what a vile human being. I'm kidding. Please, Paramount, please don't sue me. Please don't sue me. I'm kidding. I'm just kidding. I don't really have a whole lot to say about this segment. I haven't even written a script for this. I'm going to speak from the heart. It's already been pretty thoroughly documented elsewhere by people better at this than me, the idea that the original decline of Star Trek started with the movies, but the movies are also where Star Trek becomes good, in my opinion. Star Trek, the original series, is difficult for me. I respect what it's doing, but man, it was cheap. Maybe I should have written a script. It's pretty common knowledge in the fan base that the only reason Star Trek exists was because Lucille Ball was a fan of the idea. She decided to give it a chance. It was produced under Desilu Productions, the studio that she was basically in charge of. But I don't know what happened, because she basically just gave them $12, a ball of rubber bands, and said, "Go make a show, kids." And they did. The thing is, it is kind of rough to get through. There's a lot of good ideas sprinkled throughout, but man, they say 79 episodes, 3 good ones. I kind of agree with that. The movies, though, the movies are so good. Star Trek The Motion Picture is one of my favorite movies. It's my favorite science fiction film of all time. It might be my favorite Star Trek product of all time. It is just so Star Trek. There's no violence in this movie. They solve their problem with understanding. This is a movie about exploration. There's not a whole lot of action. There's no action, really. There's not really an antagonist in the traditional sense. There's no one for Kirk to go and punch. Nobody's punched in this movie. Nobody's shot. Nobody's stabbed. Nobody's decapitated. Nobody is impaled. It might be the most humanist Star Trek movie. In fact, I think this scene here is the only time the Enterprise fires its weapons at all. It's when they're stuck in a wormhole. It's when the Enterprise is stuck in a wormhole and they have to get out. They fire a photon torpedo. I don't think that at any point in this movie does this ship fire its weapons at sentient life. That is so cool. That'll never happen again. The problem is what this is, well, it's
beautiful classical music.
And he is kind of right about that. This movie's slow. It's cerebral. It requires you to think a little bit more. It requires multiple viewings. It really demands a lot of the viewer. And a public who just came off of the exciting Star Wars wasn't really having any of this. This was trying to be more Close Encounters and less Star Wars. And they didn't really work for them. I'm going to put some numbers up here in a second. You're going to see... this is the budget. This is how much it ended up making at the box office, which not technically a loss. Oh, wait, side fact. This movie has the first McDonald's Happy Meal tie-in ever. Here, check this out. This is really cool.
For you parents who don't speak Klingonese, he's saying, people of Earth, unite and bring your kids to McDonald's for a Star Trek meal. That's a regular hamburger, fries, soft drink, a McDonald's and cookie sampler, and a Star Trek prize. Oh yes, 5 different boxes based on Star Trek The Motion Picture. Action scenes, jokes, games. He says, take it from a father who knows. His kids love him. McDonald's Star Trek meal available for your kids now.
The Motion Picture. Oh, The Motion Picture, I love you so much. TMP, as the kids call it, was successful enough to merit a sequel, but the studio decided that they needed to retool a few things to try to make it appeal to a bigger audience. Once you're dealing with a box office, numbers games are a little bit different. So we start Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, with this exciting action sequence where everyone's getting blown the fuck up, and oh, Jesus Christ, Spock had some muscle spasm, sciatica, he's out. That sucks. I've had that, man. We've all had that. And everybody's dead. Welcome to Star Trek 2. Oh, but not really. We're just having fun because here's a real space Jesus to save us all. Oh, wait a minute. Is this when I'm going to insert this here? This is okay. Okay, you guys are cool. You guys have been cool. You guys have stuck with me for a long time, so I think you've earned this. I'm going to pop this in here. This is my favorite thing related to Star Trek ever. I'm going to go away for a second here, and I'm going to throw something up on the screen that I desperately want you to see. If you've stuck with me this long, you've earned this. You deserve this. Is so funny. Okay, I have disembodied myself once again to provide a little voiceover, but it's totally worth it. This is one of my favorite things of all time. This is one of those things I look at whenever I'm feeling sad and I need to put a smile on my face. A cheap smile, but a smile nonetheless. What we are looking at is an internal memo from the production team of Star Trek, written from Bob Justman, who is one of the producers on the show, to Gene Roddenberry, the head showrunner and creator. It's dated February 5th, 1968, so this is between seasons 2 and 3 of the original series. And boy, this memo came out about 15 years ago. I can't imagine why, but the Roddenberry estate put this out. I don't know if William Shatner did something to upset them, or if this was just part of some big file dump, but regardless, this puts to rest a long-standing debate over whether or not William Shatner wore a hairpiece. The memo is titled Missing Hair Goods, and I will read the letter to you as written by Bob Justman. Gene, if you haven't already heard about it, we are missing some wigs and hairpieces. Bill Shatner borrowed all 4 of his hairpieces when we finished shooting. There are 2 new ones and 2 old ones. The new ones are worth approximately $200 apiece, and the 2 old ones approximately $100 apiece. Should Star Trek go again next season, this no doubt means that we will have to construct new hairpieces again for Bill, because he will have used both the old ones and the new ones to such an extent that they will not be photographable. This I guarantee, since it has happened to us before. Majel Barrett, Gene Roddenberry's wife, Majel Barrett's wig has disappeared. Nobody, including Majel, knows what happened to it. Nichelle Nichols' wig has disappeared. She borrowed it when she finished working and claims she returned it, but neither Freddie nor Pat Westmore know anything about it being returned. That takes us up to here on Missing Hair Goods. Regards, Bob. Back to Star Trek 2. You know, something important's going on here in the scene. You have, super attractive, hot lady. You got Captain Kirk, and he's not really being a lech. He's not really being a creep. He's actually serving as a mentor. He's doing a good job. He's being a humanist. I'm sorry, Star Trek Picard, the final season, popcorn bucket from IMAX. Idic, embracing Idic. You can stay. The important thing to keep in mind about Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan is that while there is a little bit more action injected into it, it still focuses on themes. This movie is actually about getting older. It's about dealing with being middle-aged, finding your place in the world. It's about a hero redefining his worth in a lot of ways. It's a really heavy movie. The combat that we do get, hey, remember this shot from earlier? Yeah, the combat that we do get in this movie is, well, like Alex Kurtzman was saying earlier, very kind of submarine-based. It's very tactical. It's about strategy. It's about trying to outwit each other. Our main villain in this movie, Khan, over-the-top, exciting, Shakespearean-level, villain. And our equally over-the-top hero, Kirk, they're never in the same room together. They never punch each other. They never shoot each other. They never stab each other. Nobody is impaled. Nobody is decapitated. It's a bit more of a classy affair here, but it's no less exciting. I'm on the edge of my seat the whole time through this. It's just the way that they build tension and atmosphere as the ships are moving through this nebula where they're basically blind is like incredible. For better or for worse, it worked. Their gamble paid off, making Star Trek a little bit more action-based, a little bit more exciting, making people sit on the edge of their seats, and making them feel a little bit more. This movie kind of steps away from the more cerebral nature of Star Trek the Motion Picture and tries more to appeal to your feelings. Again, Star Trek tries to make you think, other franchises try to make you feel. Well, maybe at the box office that could be different. Maybe at the box office, Star Trek could do more to appeal to your heart. And, you know, maybe get into your brain in the background in the process, because what we're doing here is still interesting and it's still saying something about the human condition, and there's a lot of worth and value to be found here. The Wrath of Khan is a wonderful movie, but this is where we really start to make concessions in order to get a bigger fan base, in order to make more money at the box office. This is where a lot of sort of negative trends are set. The idea that you need an over-the-top villain who has a doomsday weapon that's going to threaten the whole universe. It all kind of starts here. And I remember my whole life, whenever they would put out a new Star Trek movie, they would compare it to this. They would say, oh, the villain in the new Star Trek movie is as good as Khan. They would always push that out there in their marketing. And I got kind of tired of it, because I like this movie. This movie works on its own. This should not be the basis for everything moving forward the way it was. This should have been the basis for everything moving forward as it was. So let's look at some numbers here. We have Star Trek The Wrath of Khan. We're going to put their budget right here. And then this is how they did at the box office. It made a ton of money. They spent less money on this one and they still made a lot. It was a success in every way. So of course we were going to get more movies. Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, is kind of underrated. It's this wonderful examination in loss. I mean, this is... David is dead. William Shatner's so good in this. He's good in all these movies. He's an underrated actor, man. I don't fully understand where that Spock thing where he would talk like this comes from, because the dude's like legitimately like, look at this. He really shines in these movies. He's like the best part of them. He's so good. We get another over-the-top villain sort of following Khan's footsteps here, but Christopher Lloyd is so good, and he's bringing so much depth and gravitas and layers of just intrigue. You just want to peel back and see more of what's going on with this guy. He's really compelling to watch. It's so, look at that atmosphere. God, it's so good. He's just dealing with loss. It's just a dude dealing with loss. The last movie was about getting old. This movie's about dealing with death. God, it's so good. Star Trek 3 is so good, and people just kind of, oh, it's one of the odd ones. You're dumb. If we're talking about Star Trek movies, I've already said the motion picture is my favorite one. Voyage Home, Star Trek 4 might be my second favorite. It's kind of universally loved. Everyone knows what's good about it. It's light, it's fun. Again, there's really no violence in this. I don't think anyone really gets shot, decapitated, impaled. It's got an environmental message. It's, very Star Trek in that regard. There's humanism injected into this. There's social consciousness and awareness and caring for our planet. This is very Gene Roddenberry in a lot of ways, even though at this point he was kind of just relegated to the position of a consultant for the movies. They just kind of wanted to keep him at an arm's length, but close enough so that they could still say, hey, we got Gene Roddenberry here, you fucking weirdo cultist, so you don't have to be put out. You can come be a part of it. I'm a member of that cult. There's absolutely nothing wrong with Star Trek being goofy, with Star Trek being light, with Star Trek being fun, but there usually has to be some reason for it. There has to be a purpose. It's driven by the story and it's driven by the plot. It's not just there to inject a little levity into the moment and to lighten the tension. It's actually there for plot purposes. That's what we mean when we talk about good, smart writing. Star Trek V is actually my third favorite Star Trek movie. Everybody hates this one. Again, it's one of the odd ones. This movie is What Does God Need with a Starship? The antagonist of this movie is basically the American evangelical movement of the 1980s. Name another big budget, sci-fi, goofy popcorn action movie that dares to confront religion in this fashion. This movie's really cool. We're going to talk about this more in another time. I think I want to dig into it a little deeper, but Star Trek V, underrated. There's a lot going on here. It's trying to say a lot, and it's probably, I mean, the movie's cheap. It is garbage. It is probably, stepping beyond its reach a little bit as far as ambition goes, but man, it's pretty gosh darn Star Trek in my opinion. As far as the quality goes, that just appeals to me because, here, I really need to get him cleaned up, but I did build a working Tom Servo here to help me get through some of these movies. I love cheesy movies. I love James Wen's Birdemic is better to me than anything Steven Spielberg ever made. What do you think? If the fact that I've just made an hour-and-a-half long video talking about the current state of Star Trek isn't geek cred enough, there's my geek cred. I was very young when Star Trek 6 came out. I think I was 5 or 6. It's talking about the Cold War, basically. It's getting into ideas that I really didn't understand at the time. I always thought this movie was kind of boring. I had a hard time getting into it, but they do start to make more concessions here where William Shatner is obviously an elderly man at this point who they're trying to make look like an action hero. They're trying to make him seem sexy. Wrath of Khan writer, director Nicholas Myers returns for this film. And oddly enough, it still doesn't really tread a lot of that water again. The antagonist of this movie is really just politics. This is a movie about people who have been fighting an enemy so long they can't even remember why they're fighting them anymore. It's about trying to get over that and how difficult that can be. As much as Star Trek wants to depict humanity in a more enlightened state, in a lot of ways it's also showing us how we get there, and this is an important part of it. We're still getting into heavier themes, we're still getting into important messages about humanity, we're still talking, and this movie's really talking about politics. Again, just kind of through the lens of aliens, but it is very much talking about modern issues. There's some action here. There's the man who's kicked in the knee dicks. This one kind of stumbles for me. I don't love this movie. People talk about how the even ones are supposed to be better, but I always thought that Star Trek 6 was just kind of okay for me. But I mean, still, it's still watchable. It's still fun. None of the original series movies are bad. I like all the original series movies. They kind of do their own thing. The problems really begin with the next generation movies. From here on out, every movie will try to ape on the successes of the Wrath of Khan. We will have an over-the-top villain, an over-the-top Shakespearean villain with a doomsday weapon and or some sort of revenge plot. He doesn't really have a revenge plot in this movie. He's just trying to get back to the Nexus, which is the dumbest thing ever. This is getting into magic, metaphysics. This stuff doesn't really have anything to do with the science that would define a lot of the writing on Star Trek The Next Generation. So we get away from that here too. But people were excited for this movie. Star Trek The Next Generation was huge. The 7 seasons that it was on, it continued to maintain a strong viewer base. And then when it was announced that it was ending, it didn't really feel like it was being canceled. It felt like it was graduating, that it was being promoted up to the movies. They started working on this movie just a few weeks after they've completed production on the television series. They went right into this. They had no time to really plan. I feel bad for the writers. I think this is Ron Moore and Brandon Braga who wrote this. All good things. The finale of the television show is like a perfect ending. It just wraps everything up beautifully. And I feel like they put a lot of their heart into that script, and then they were probably pretty drained when they had to go right into the movie. And boy, it feels like they never quite figured out what's going on in this film because it's a bit of a confused mess. There's a lot of problems. Now, I'm not going to go into detail of all the problems here because I feel like Red Letter Media already did that perfectly with their Plinkett reviews. Those videos changed my life. They changed the way I watch movies. They changed my perspective on a lot of things, and they're really important to me, and I think they still hold up, and you should check them out. There's a review for each of these movies, and really, really important points are made. I mean, some of it's a little pedantic, but none of it's wrong. It still holds up. My biggest issues with these movies is the way they handle the character of Jean-Luc Picard. This really becomes a problem in everybody's favorite Star Trek movie. That isn't The Wrath of Khan, anyway, and that would be First Contact. The fact that we would take such a thoughtful character who, like, on the TV show, we saw him refuse to commit genocide on the Borg because he acknowledged them as an actual race. We get into the heavier philosophy of that's an episode called I, Borg. I should probably have that going on in the background, but, you know, whatever. We're going to look at Angry Picard here because that's what we're talking about. It's just so weird that they turned our thoughtful diplomat into this action character. These movies are schlock. These movies are total schlock. There's no themes in here. They're not really talking about anything. I guess maybe there's a Moby Dick thing going on with Patrick Stewart, but it's not like they really get into the nature of PTSD or anything the way they do in the episode Family. Look at this. This is just... You would never see anything like this happening. Look at that. Nothing... There's Patrick Stewart swinging around. I believe by the time you get to the movies here, Patrick Stewart is an executive producer. He starts to have a little bit more say, or at least they're injecting things into the script to keep him happy, which, oh boy. Star Trek Nemesis is my least favorite Star Trek movie. This thing is exhausting. I've only actually completed it once. I watched it in the theater when it came out. Any other time I've tried to watch it at home, I fall asleep halfway through it, but there's no themes. This movie actually isn't about anything. It's about this guy who has a doomsday weapon and he wants revenge. He's an over-the-top Shakespearean villain, and the movie's not actually about anything. Our characters don't learn anything. Picard doesn't really learn anything by the end of the movie. He basically just has to kill this guy. Oh, how nice. We have a Star Trek movie where man has been impaled. I don't know, man. This is hard. You know, people want to rag on new Star Trek for being over the top with its violence and for dumbing things down. These next-gen movies are really where that starts. The Wrath of Khan is where the precedent is set that you can inject a little bit of action into a movie in order to get people to show up who normally wouldn't. And the next-gen movies just kind of focus on that. They've cranked that up to 11, and it becomes the main focus of the story. It becomes the main focus of the script and the main focus of the plot. We don't really have any themes to dig our teeth into other than, I guess, heroic sacrifice? Is that a theme? Is that something that you can take into your personal life that you've really had to think about as you get older and as you've just had to navigate your way through our culture? This movie doesn't offer any of that. It's just explosions and shit. Star Trek Nemesis has this really weird scene where it's like desert redneck dune buggy driving, and it seems to be totally at the behest of Patrick Stewart. They said that Patrick Stewart likes driving. Apparently Patrick Stewart's kind of like a Jay Leno type where he's like obsessed with cars and driving, and so look how happy he looks. I don't think he's acting there. This seems to be genuine. Okay, that's charming, whatever, but this is not right for a Star Trek movie. How is this helping us express our themes, and what themes are we even talking about here? This movie's just nonsense. There's no substance. It doesn't say anything. And it doesn't go anywhere, really. This movie's such a bummer, man. This is my least favorite Star Trek movie. We get an over-the-top Shakespearean villain in this one who has a doomsday weapon and a revenge plot. In a lot of ways, Star Trek Picard feels like Star Trek Nemesis. There's not much in the way of themes here. I tried watching this just as, a dumb science fiction show that had nothing to do with Star Trek. I just tried disconnecting that from the entire franchise in my brain as I watched this, and just these characters are not likable, the plot's not interesting, there are no heavy themes that we're getting into. It's just basically sci-fi violence. They're not even really, the idea of Patrick Stewart being like an elderly man is barely even touched on here. This isn't about Patrick Stewart dealing with age. I don't know what's going on here. There's the Romulan sexy hot Romulan sexy lady, sexy man, sexy people, and then they're not doing or saying anything. Don't worry, we're not missing out on anything. This is so bad. I mean, ultimately, Star Trek Beyond is just about another over-the-top villain with a doomsday weapon and a revenge plot, and that's it. This guy doesn't have any pathos deeper than that. There's really there's nothing driving him deeper than that. That's eat your popcorn, shut up, and watch this. It feels like slop. It feels like that's why it feels like less prestigious in some level. They're really not trying to say anything. And I mean, you can say things in a big, dumb sci-fi movie. We saw them say things in Star Trek 4. We saw them say things in Star Trek the Motion Picture. We saw them say things in Star Trek 5 even. You can do it. And you can have fun in the process. They don't even try here. They don't try to inject any of those themes even into the background. They don't even pay lip service to them, which I don't understand, because it seems like at the bare least, at bare minimum, that would be an easy way to appease old school Trekkies, people looking for something a little deeper. But they're just so afraid of alienating the Fast and Furious crowd that they won't even dip into any of those things. They just, here you are, take your slop and eat it. Ugh. I don't like this movie. This movie's not fun to me. I want Star Trek to... You know what I would really love? I would love Star Trek to have a movie where there's not really an antagonist. They are up against some sort of issue, some sort of problem, that maybe there's some sort of danger, a theme of, it's like, hey, the environmental themes are more important now than ever. Maybe we can dip back into that well, like go back to the Star Trek 4, the Voyage Home realm, and just do something that's not this. This isn't fun or interesting. This is just... fall asleep during this. Again, this is another movie I've only watched once. I saw this in the theater and I've never watched it again since. I don't care about the over-the-top villain and his doomsday weapon and his revenge plot. I just don't care about any of that. Most of the problems that we've identified with New Trek actually trace back to the Next Generation movies in the 90s. Now, that's not an excuse just to say that those problems existed there, that those problems began there. We can definitely course correct, and we should course correct, and we need to course correct. But if we're just pointing the finger, if we're trying to figure out who to blame, we all are. It's the fickle film viewing public who is actually to blame for all this. I think, anyway, because that's really where the concessions started to be made. We started to make them at the box office to get more people to show up to the movies. So, I mean, by the time we get to the J.J. Abrams movies here, these problems already exist. They're just blown up. They kind of realized what made people show up in mass, and they focused on those things a little bit too hard. These movies, again, have absolutely no themes. The J.J. Abrams movies say nothing. They're fun popcorn movies. They work. I like the first two a lot. The third one, a lot of people would say it's actually the highest quality, but I'm just so bored of the formula by then, because we're not saying anything. We're not doing anything different. It would just be nice if we could slow down, if we could get a Star Trek movie that just gives us time to breathe, to let the themes build, to focus on our characters, and to just kind of exist in this world for a little bit without constantly being shot out and having to run from location to location. And I think a film going public's ready for that. I mean, Oppenheimer was huge. That movie's like 3 hours long. Here, let's put up the numbers on that. That movie's like classical music, and look at those numbers. Where is it? The Arrival? The Arrival, this is like the best Star Trek movie made in ever. This is like the best sequel to Star Trek the Motion Picture. It plays on those themes in a lot of ways. This movie was pretty successful. You know what else is slow and feels like classical music? The Dune movies. Dune, these movies are boring as shit, and look at the box office numbers on these fucking things. I mean, we're talking about an American public who is currently trained on binging an entire season of a television show in the course of a couple of days. I think the same people who will sit through and watch all of Game of Thrones in the course of a week will be perfectly fine sitting through something like this. Even like the release the Snyder Cut weirdos, like they released that 6-hour version of the Justice League movie, which I guess is better than the original, but man, that movie, Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice, that is actually the first time I ever felt embarrassed to be sitting in a movie theater. I feel like I know what Paul Rubens felt like when he was caught in that movie theater, because around the time that like Batman hits Superman over the head with a sink in a filthy bathroom, I was like literally putting my hood up, and I was like, oh my God. And I was looking around, and I remember thinking, like, I hope no one in this theater recognizes me. I hope no one sees that I'm watching this Zack Snyder embarrassing Batman versus Superman movie. And there was only like 4 other people there, so I didn't have to worry about it. But I was like, I remember just watching the rest of it, like, and that was traumatic. Like Man of Steel is traumatic because they make you relive 9/11 100 times in the course of like 10 minutes at the end of the film. Oh my God, Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice is just the worst. It's just the worst. You release the Snyder Cut weirdos, you're weirdos. But I embrace you in my heart in the realm of idic. You just gotta tone it down a little bit. All right, what were we talking about? I think that that means that I gotta be getting close to wrapping it up here. What was I getting at? Oh yeah, I was just, once I start talking about Zack Snyder, that means it's gotta be over. I gotta be done. Yeah, I've reached the point where I'm just rambling now. So listen, if you're still listening to me, thank you so much. Thank you for hearing me out. It's been, Star Trek's my favorite thing in the world. I've got Star Trek and Metal Gear Solid. Maybe we'll talk about Metal Gear Solid if anyone watches this video and people are curious about what I have to say. Maybe we'll go there, but I do think I'm going to make a video talking about Star Trek V next. For whatever it's worth, I still believe in this. I still believe in what this stands for. I think Star Trek's an important vehicle to getting people to better and bigger ideas. I would not be the person I am today if Star Trek didn't exist. And for that reason, I worry about the kids who are turning onto modern Trek and just seeing violence, and they're just being force-fed bubblegum pop, and there are no ideas that are trying to guide them into secular humanism, other than representation, which is great. We love the representation, but we got to have a little bit more than that, at least as far as Star Trek is concerned. But again, just thank you. Thank you so much for just bearing with me, for hearing me out. If you disagree with anything, that's totally cool. That's, I look forward to seeing what you have to say down in the comments. All 7 of you who have actually watched this. I kind of rambled for a while here. I have covered some areas that other people haven't. My major influence is pretty obvious, probably is Red Letter Media. They've covered this in great detail. I'm just trying to fill in some of the gaps I feel like they've missed, even though they've thoroughly covered these issues. They've spent hours and hours and hours talking about this, and that's been therapeutic. I thank those guys for making those videos because it's really help me process it and get through that. where does this leave us? Like, as Star Trek fans, how do we move on in the wake of, well, the last 10 years of everything? I don't have the answers, and I'm sorry. I've spent so much time thinking about this, and I don't know. Wait a minute! There's one man who's always been able to save this ship whenever it's in trouble, no matter what. Scotty! Scotty can save us! He invented the plexiglass to save the whales, and when he was Simon Pegg, he figured out how to do the transporting at the warp speed, and Scotty can save us. If anyone can save us, it's Scotty. If anyone can save us, it's him. All right, I know he's no longer with us, and this is a desperate plan, but we're pretty desperate. Through the power of mushroom spore magic, I'm going to send a letter into the past. Scotty could end our suffering. Dear Chief Engineer Jimmy Doohan.
I got a fan letter. It was a suicide note.
Star Trek is beautiful classical music and Star Wars is rock and roll. It felt like Star Trek needed a little bit more rock and roll to connect to a modern audience.
I couldn't believe what I saw. It was definitely suicide.